For centuries, raw materials left African shores, taking with them jobs, growth, and added value. That is beginning to change. Across the continent, economies are working to capture more value at home, turning local resources into industry, opportunity, and lasting progress. In Lesotho, the OPEC Fund and its partners helped to build Tikoi Industrial Park in the capital, Maseru. The project is creating more than 20,000 jobs in textile manufacturing, logistics, and warehousing.
We are taking African leather, we transform it into the masterpiece, because it's a time that Africa must do their own stuff, they must do their own product, and manufacturing something from their own raw material and transforming it into the finished goods that the world can appreciate and cherish.
For 50 years, the OPEC Fund has supported countries in building stronger economies by adding value locally and expanding opportunity. Lesotho is one of many African countries to benefit from this approach. In Zimbabwe and across sub-Saharan Africa, a total of $100 million in OPEC fund loans is supporting ETC Group's operation to strengthen food security, reduce environmental impact, and improve livelihoods for 600,000 smallholder farmers.
When I'm home, I discuss with my family, especially my kids, that this beast bought it from cotton, this house built it from cotton, so that I encourage them to continue growing cotton. That makes me feel proud of myself, because I achieve a lot of things because of cotton.
From cotton fields to textile production in Zimbabwe, Africa is creating stronger local value chains, building the farms, factories, and industries that will fuel growth for generations. The OPEC Fund is proud to be part of that journey.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, thank you so much for joining us in this special session titled Upgrading Local Value Chains, Driving High-Value Exports and Diversifying Growth. This is one of the pillars upon which the broader conference theme is predicated, which is a transition to empower tomorrow. How do we empower tomorrow? Well, by upgrading local value chains, driving high-value exports and diversifying growth. As you came in, you saw the video which just was demonstrating some of the work that is being done with the support of the OPEC Fund on the African continent. We heard about the apparel factory, Tikwe, in Lesotho, and also the story of ETS and cotton farming in Zimbabwe. And that's just an example of how you build between farming agriculture for cotton, textile manufacturing, and then opening new markets for manufacturing. And I think what it demonstrates is we're not passive in Africa in general. In a short while, you'll hear about the second phase of implementation of Agenda 2063, led by the African Union. There's a lot of work that's being done there to build on regional integration on the continent and to support African countries with the industrialization initiatives and to help them craft industrial policies. In 2018, up until now, they've been the building blocks of an African continental free trade area. In 2026, we've heard that 50 African countries have deposited their instruments of ratification to bring to life this AFCFTA. And we know that if done properly, we could see about $300 trillion unlocked in trade value in Africa. That is the promise of tomorrow. But to get there, a few things need to happen. We heard earlier on in the plenary, it was discussed that we need core infrastructure such as energy. We definitely need roads for logistics. We need to support special economic zones. And we need the capital expenditure that drives that level of catalyzation for high-value manufacturing and connecting African markets to global markets. So that is going to be the conversation we're having here today. We're going to have the conversation in two parts. First, a fireside conversation with two key policymakers on the continent, and then we'll broaden the theme up with a separate moderator. At this juncture, I'd like to introduce our discussants. We have His Excellency, the Vice President of Botswana, who is also the Minister of Finance in Botswana, His Excellency Ndaba Nkosinathi Kgaolate, and he's joined by Dr. Sidi Ultar, the President of the African Development Bank, and we're in conversation together. So if I may request that President Sidi Ultar joins us, as well as Vice President of Botswana Ndaba Kgaolate join us on stage, please. Thank you, sir. You can sit either way. Thank you so much. Nice to see you again. I think the design is I'll be in the middle and each gentleman to my side. You can sit over here, sir, with the microphone, and over there, sir, with the microphone. Thank you. Right here, we're trying to do a form of gender empowerment. I am the one empowered. Thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. It's a quick conversation, but I think we really just want you to set the tone for us when we talk about unlocking value chains. We'll start with you, Vice President of Botswana and also Finance Minister of Botswana. So we know that Botswana ranks quite highly in the democracy and development indices in Africa. In fact, the work that has been done since independence has now transitioned Botswana from a poor nation to what is termed an upper middle income economy, because you've used over decades mining resources to provide things like free education and subsidized healthcare. But market forces are changing. We need to be realistic about that. And as market forces are changing, Botswana is having to think about diversification of production, especially beyond mineral and diamond production, and value addition of resources to boost your competitiveness. Could you reflect this journey of transformation and transition for you, what you're learning, where the opportunities are, and where the challenges have been as you need to think beyond diamonds?
Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity to share our journey. Let me start by saying that Botswana has been very fortunate. Botswana is known to have been fortunate to be a diamond country. For a long time, we were producing and exporting more than 100 million carats of diamonds annually. We were able to transform Botswana from being one of the 3 poorest countries in the world to now an upper middle class economy. And within a generation, we have been able to improve or increase GDP per person 100-fold. But the economic model that has made Botswana what it is cannot be the same economic model that builds a new Botswana. The old economic model was about using diamond revenues to build infrastructure, to build education, healthcare. And the new economic model has to be different. We have to diversify the economy. We diversify or we perish. Yeah. The journey or the strategy that we have decided to embark on is we partnered with a strategy firm. And the first thing we did a global and continental diagnostics of global value chains and where Botswana fits in those value chains. Once we had done that, we had an international and local call for investment proposals and investment ideas. We received about 7,000 of them. And of those 7,000 business proposals or prospects, we had a very rigorous, if not ruthless, process where we filtered those down to just 186. Wow. 186 of what we consider to be potentially high-impact, transformative projects. That was not enough. We then decided to put everybody under one roof, in the same room, into what we call economic laboratories. And we said, these 186 potentially transformative projects, we need you to meet every day, morning until night, for 4 weeks. At the end of 4 weeks, we need you to give us an execution map for each of these 186 projects. Under the room, all the decision makers in government, decision makers on land, on permits, the project sponsors themselves, academics, financiers. After 4 weeks, we had this execution plan. With this execution plan, we then said we need to have a secretariat that we ring-fence and protect from the rest of the government bureaucracy. A microcosm, a center of excellence to mechanize and execute these 186 based on this execution plan. Jealously protected. Now, once we had we had done that, the idea is this: in life, you cannot boil the ocean.
Right.
You start with a microcosm of excellence, with the hope that you will be able to diffuse that excellence into the rest of the system and scale that up. So this is where we are as a country. We have this sandbox that is now part of our new journey. What it has also done is that because it has crowdsourced ideas and prospects for engines of economic development, is not the government that has decided which of the sectors have the highest prospects for diversifying the economy. It is these ideas from the ground that have actually given us 6 key economic sectors: agriculture, agricultural processing, tourism, manufacturing, energy, infrastructure, financial services, and digitalization. And then we have 3 social sectors, which is healthcare, education, and social protection. Now, what is the lesson, or what has been the difficult part of this journey? The first is we have had to be honest with ourselves as a country that we have, as Botswana, we are very renowned for being very good at policy formulation, policy conceptualization. But we've had to be honest with ourselves, we are very poor at execution.
Yeah. Okay.
So if there's the one thing we need to do as a country to move forward, to diversify, to build the new Botswana, we have to build the capacity to execute at scale. So one of the painful things that we have had to do is to prioritize ruthlessly. We have been working on 5-year development plans. We have every development plan has about 6,000 projects. But those 6,000 projects are half-baked. You try to be everything to everyone. But with this very razor-focused process, you are ruthless, meaning that you are so focused, you learn how to say no to what is half-baked and half. So this is a picture of the journey that...
In the interest of time, Your Excellency, I'm going to ask us to move on, but I think we get the pictures. You've had to be very meticulous in your diagnostics, meticulous in choosing what works, and not be ideological. Say, this is what the evidence shows us, and then focus on execution, which I think has been a weakness for many African governments. We've got ideas, but do we really bring them to life? And you said, it's time to get things done. Thank you so much. We now move on to the role of multilateral development banks. As I said, Dr. Ulta, we have a master plan of sorts in Agenda 2063, and it's predicated on 7 pillars. Industrialization is one of them. But we know infrastructure is really where there is a shortfall in funding per annum and just getting these projects up and going. And these are long-term projects. This is where you fill the gap. Could you give us your sense of what's needed to support the transformation of Africa?
Thank you very much. Let me first congratulate OPEC Fund for its Golden Jubilee and thank President Al Khalifa for inviting us. And also thank him for the support provided to the replenishment of the 17 ADF, African Development Fund. The 2 billion provided by OPEC Fund are really critical for Africa. So going back to your question, so let us start with a very simple paradox. So Africa is home to almost 18% of the world population and very soon 25% of the world population. We do have more than 60% of the uncultivated arable lands in the world. We hold more than 30% of the world minerals. And for critical minerals, sometimes 60 to 70%. But our share of the world GDP is less than 4%. And our share in the global trade is around 3%. So this shows that Africa is exporting raw materials at a very low price and importing finished goods and equipment at a very high price. Yeah. Let me pick up a very simple example. Bauxite, the largest deposit of bauxite in the world and in Africa. And bauxite is used to produce aluminum. Today, as we speak, African countries are exporting bauxite at $63 a metric ton. And you need 4 metric tons to produce 1 ton of aluminum. And today, the ton of aluminum is sold at $3,415 as we speak. So it's 13 times the price. And what is the difference between bauxite and aluminum is just manufacturing, processing. This is why the priority of all African countries is really to manufacture and to process African raw materials in Africa. This applies for agriculture. Cocoa, the example is very well known. So let us see why we are not able to do it in Africa. Very simple. First, energy. To process raw material, we need really to have energy at scale. And so far in Africa, we have 600 million people without access to electricity, let alone processing commodities. Yeah. So we need to really to invest, and this is why Mission 300 is very important, not only for providing electricity to households, but also to make it easy for Africa to process its commodities. We need also to invest heavily in infrastructure. Yeah. We need really port, airport, roads, corridors to develop our. But we need also to bring investors. This cannot be achieved through the public finance. Yeah. So we need really to bring investors to invest in Africa. We don't lack resources in Africa, by the way. It is estimated that Africa needs $400 billion to fill the gap. Right. For the investment, it is around 100 to 170 billion every year. But in Africa, we do have $4 trillion in savings. Right. But these savings are not channeled to fund the development. So this is why at the African Development Bank, one of our top priorities is really to work with all our sister institutions. And I am very happy to see that we have all of them here in this room. So to create a coalition, call it New African Financial Architecture for Development, to work with African financial institutions, but also with partners like OPEC Fund and other institutions, the Arab Coordination Group, the World Bank, right. and other players. So our aim is not only to provide financing, but also to de-risk investment, because that will enable us to unlock the African saving, but also to bring the international institutional investor. And why investors are not really very keen to invest in Africa? Because they perceive a risk. This risk is perceived, maybe it's not a real risk, or it's an exaggerated risk. Right. But still, the narrative about Africa, and the media have contributed to that, rating agencies have their share of responsibility. What we need to do today is really to change the narrative about Africa, but also to set up some instrument which will give comfort to institutional investors. And this is why the African Development Bank decided recently to increase its stake in ATD, the Africa Trade Investment and Development Insurance, to increase its stake fivefold, to become the largest shareholders, and to lead the recapitalization of ATD, and to work with all the partners in Africa and in the G7 to bring this entity to the AA level or AAA level, to be able really to provide guarantees for investors who want to invest in Africa.
All right, so I've heard many things. That you've said is that really the catalyzation of these investments can come from multilateral development banks in a new financial arrangement with asset managers and others coming in to see the potential, change the narrative. But you've said something really important and poignant, which is if we just continue exporting raw materials, not only do we lose the value, but even the surplus that can be earned in sales of value maximization. And so we should really think through what that looks like. Finally, just to really bring this together, you've mentioned partnership. Dr. Abdul Hamid Al Khalifa has also mentioned partnership. It becomes the principle upon which we move forward. Botswana and the ADB, my understanding, AFDB, have been working together on the Botswana Economic Transformation Program. Can you just give us an understanding, just from this example, what it is like when a multilateral development institution comes in touch with a sovereign like yourselves? You've got an agenda, they've also got to protect their capital, but you've got to work towards this common goal. What does a partnership actually look like when it's actualized? Perhaps we start with you, Vice President, and then you can synthesize it for us.
Well, I'm very proud to say that the kind of leaders, the new generation leaders of multilateral organizations like Dr. Sidi and His Excellency Khalifa here, there is something special they bring to the table, and I want to explain. Traditionally, sovereigns and countries had to adapt two hard and fixed financial instruments. The multilateral organizations said, this is how we do business. These are the financial instruments, and you need to work within this realm. This new generation of leaders says, we are willing to listen to the new generation of leaders on the African continent. Yeah. You are bringing economic models that are not necessarily textbook, and in this case, Botswana Economic Transformation Program. And we require very different types of financial instruments. Our generation, or the new model for economic development, my emphasis everywhere I go, any part of the world, is that the biggest priority for us in Botswana, and I would argue in Africa, is building the capacity to execute at scale. Yeah. So in the past, financial institutions used to help sovereigns design projects. But now, it's not enough to design projects. Ecosystems have to be built. Multilateral organizations have to have financial instruments that are not just loan funding. They have to be alive to peculiarities of risk, bring in new age type elements of, guarantee elements, first loss. That's one. Two is the sequencing. In the past, multilateral organizations would fund a factory without even worrying that there's no infrastructure to support that factory, no skills, no human resources to man that factory, no markets, no organized way to go to market. So you've built a white elephant. The new age leaders in the multilateral organizations are willing to listen and say, let us collectively co-create and build an ecosystem. And building capacity to execute at scale is the biggest challenge that Botswana faces. I would argue the biggest challenge that the continent faces. And the challenge for multilateral organizations is to work with, co-create with countries to build this capacity to execute.
Okay, and so that's the real equity. Make sure that the sovereigns have the voice and are co-creating and are showing you what their market needs, not a one-size-fits-all solution. Dr. Olsa.
I couldn't agree more. In fact, as mentioned this morning by President Al-Khalifa, countries are in the driving seat. So our role as an institution is really to accompany them. So they are those who hold the pen, they decide whatever they want and what is good for their country. Our role is really to provide capacity development, to contribute to policy formulation, and to help them to mobilize resources and to de-risk investment. But the decision-making is in the hand of the countries. It's country ownership which dictates the trajectory and the destination.
Well, we thank you so much for your time. The AFDB has done so much for Africa, and Botswana has been such a great model to emulate. And we thank you just for sharing with us very briefly your insights. Please, ladies and gentlemen, if you could thank His Excellency Ndaba Nkosinathi Kgaolate, joined by Dr. Sidi Olta, the President of the African Development Bank. We continue this conversation on unlocking local value chains, driving high-value exports, and diversifying growth. I'd now like to hand over the floor to our moderator, who is Dr. Andreas Claassen, the Executive Director of the Lille Institute for Public Value in Germany, with his panel.
Thank you so much. Can you just join us? Excellent. Well done. Thank you very much, Lerato, and thank you for this inspiring fireside chat, which makes it easy for us to continue with our panel. And I would like to invite my panelists to join me on stage as well, as we just heard about upgrading local value chains and driving high-value exports and diversifying growth. Please join me on stage, please. Minister as well, Your Excellency, great to see you. Before we kick off with our discussion, I would like to congratulate His Excellency, the President, Dr. Abdulhamid Al-Khalifa, for this opportunity for the 50 years of successful support of the OPEC Fund, and of course also on the 5th edition of a highly successful forum. Very impressive. Thank you so much for the opportunity. It is a joy to introduce the panelists for this morning panel, and I would like to start with His Excellency Isifu Saidu, the Minister of State for Climate Change and Sustainability from Ghana. Lovely to see you. Good morning. Joined by Mr. Admasu Tedesi, the President and CEO of the Eastern and Southern African Trade and Development Bank, TDB. Hello, good to see you, my dear friends. Good morning and welcome, Your Excellency Ambassador Selma Malika Haddadi, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union Commission. Good morning. And next to me is His Excellency Neil Riekenberg, the Minister of Finance from Eswatini. Good morning and lovely to have you. So the idea is to think a bit about a couple of ideas on this diversification on the continent. And I would like to start with you, Neil, when we think about how to move from ambition to investment. If we think about Eswatini and the significant fiscal turnaround, which has been quite impressive, how you were able to reduce the deficit and to boost investment in the country. can you tell us how are you using this improved fiscal position to drive economic diversification and also how to better include private sector growth in the country?
Thank you so much, Professor. Lovely being here, and thank you so much for the invitations and for the lovely event that we're enjoying here. So Eswatini, it comes from an interesting path. We've come from like a 20-year, 2% growth kind of space, and not having great ratings, not having great IMF reports, World Bank reports. So we focused on trying to get our image better as a country, and over a few years, and kind of about 4 years ago, we started getting it right, where our Article 4s, there was a list of things, wage bill issues, we sorted those out. Fiscal deficit brought it down from 7.5 to about 2. Being on a sustainable path now, SACU volatility, we put a stabilization fund in place. A few different things like that, even just political image, dealt with a few matters like that, or misunderstandings rather. And that then meant that a lot of our image really changed. And we changed from a country that will generally be seen as really not investable to investable. Moody's gave us an upgrade. Our bonds on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange went from junk status to investment grade. And so all of that then meant now that all of a sudden the world's finances open to Eswatini. Now so what happens then, our GDP growth has now moved from an average of 2 to an average of about 5. So for this is our third year, about a 5% growth, and was hopefully trending upwards. But that now creates two things. Number one, the private sector has now got access to funds, which they never had before. And so all of a sudden there's new growth in the private sector space. But at the same time, government has got access to a whole lot more funds they're not used to. And so now the temptation, because you've got desperate needs as a country, things you desperately need to do. But the temptation to now move off the sustainable path is brutally difficult to maintain. And that's the trick for a country. So when you get to that place to still maintain the sustainability, to continue to making sure your private sector can continue to grow as they need to, is very tricky. So as a country battling with that and working on it, but if you ask me where's the challenge, that's where the challenge lies. Thank you.
And that's the reason why we need a brave Minister of Finance, and I think the country is very happy to have you on that and keep that approach. Thanks a lot also for giving us a bit of background, and of course also about like what the sectors are driving that growth, which gives me an opportunity to ask Your Excellency Sifu regarding different sectors, but maybe in particular regarding the agricultural sector, because that's a quite important sector in Ghana. On the other hand, as we all know, climate change is threatening the productive systems in the country. So how is Ghana building climate resilience into the different value chains? Because that's our topic, how to really think about like this growing value chains on the continent and in the country. And also listening a bit to what we just heard is what does this mean for attracting investment now in Ghana?
Thank you very much. And I bring you warm greetings from His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, the President of the Republic of Ghana. I am here to represent him. And I thank you for this opportunity. What we should be looking at, and what we are looking at in Ghana, is to diversify our agri sector in such a way that we're able to do value additions. If we're investing in the agri sector, the ultimate aim is for you to arrange your investment in such a way that you add value. For instance, if you look at the cocoa sector, Ghana is about the second largest producer of cocoa. And about 80% of it is exported in its raw state. So for instance, for you to be able to make an impact, you have to look at how to process cocoa into chocolate so that at the end of the day, you add value, create jobs, and build your economy. So this is a very critical area for us in Ghana because the cocoa sector makes a difference for our economy. Now, beyond that, most of our farm produce are perishable. For instance, if you look at tomatoes and others, about 30 to 40% of the farm produce cannot be accounted for. So Ghana, we are looking at alternative ways of developing and adding value to this product so that at the end of the day, we'll change tomatoes into paste. Then you can have all year-round supply of it. Because currently it is seasonal. And because it is seasonal, you are unable to sustain the demand. And in the long run, even though you produce, then you have to import. So the agri sector has to go through an evolution, and that evolution has to be climate sensitive. By climate sensitive, we are looking at having smart agri initiatives that we can do all year-round farming, that we can add value to this farm produce, and at the end of the day, we're creating jobs and building the local industry. So that is what we are looking at as a country.
Thank you very much to be very concrete. I think that's a very powerful example, what you just explained. And you said two important sentences to my. First, you said like how to create more impact or public value. And you said like we have to diversify, we have to really work on the value chains and then create jobs in the country and to diversify within Ghana. But also at the beginning, you said like the financing element is crucial to do that. And that's maybe the perfect opener to our next panelist, Admasu. Financing is basically what you do on the continent. And financing is something where you work regarding different elements because TDB works on the intersection between trade and development and investment. When we think about the huge financing gaps, for example, $2.5 trillion is the global trade financing gap. Multilateral financial institutions such as TDB help to narrow that gap. But from your point of view, and again, let's try to be very concrete, as what are the most important financing gaps on the continent and how to close that regarding economic diversification, but also on these value chains in Africa?
Thank you very much for the question. Also delighted to be here at this occasion of the 50th anniversary. OPEC Fund is a partner of many of us. And of course, the topic is very, very pertinent because these are not new questions that we're asking. We've been chasing these like the Holy Grail for many decades. And we can't seem to crack it. And I think one of the things that came out in the earlier discussion prior to this panel was the size of the gap, the 400 billion that Dr. Sidi referred to. But very quickly, after the volume of the gap was referred to, we heard from the minister, Vice President of Botswana, that what we're solving for is not gaps at the project level. We're solving for gaps at the ecosystem level. Yeah. And we've seen this because in many cases you have clients who you have served at the project level only for them to come back and tell you, we've succeeded at the factory floor or we've succeeded at the farm level, but the minute the product leaves our facility, the inefficiencies mount. By the time they hit the market, they're no longer competitive. If they hit the market, 30–40% of it actually perishes even before it gets to the logistics chain because it can't be stored. And this is why these days everybody is fixated on ecosystem approaches, because we know that it's not just one little problem you're solving for. They're all interconnected, and it's a classic case of the butterfly effect. One small problem can actually break down everything. And so this is why we talk about synergy, we talk about innovative instruments that can help deal with different sides of the problem. And so I think these days, MDBs, of course, de-risking has become something that everybody's refocusing on, as we've heard. But apart from de-risking, there's also the question of providing a different kind of capital. And so in the African continent, we know that debt is a constraint, but a much bigger constraint is equity financing. And I think we've heard this whole discussion around sustainable and suitable energy outside of urban areas. If we're going to create agro-processing in rural areas, it's not always going to be very feasible to extend grids very quickly into the rural areas. So you need off-grid solutions. To get off-grid solutions, you also need to start dealing with a different kind of utility, not the usual traditional utility. There is a room and a place for them, but you also need innovative approaches that unlocks different types of energy producers. Yeah. And this is the distributed renewable energy campaign that we're all on. I think we heard Mission 300 is a key drive towards that. We have joined the African Development Bank and the World Bank in pushing the Mission 300 agenda. And what's so interesting there is we're not just pushing debt outside the door. We've just recently helped create a permanent capital vehicle that can provide equity, risk capital to distributed renewable energy companies, private sector companies, who were asking to go into rural areas and deal with markets that don't even exist. And so for them to be able to do that, they say to you, well, thank you for the debt, but that's not what we need. We need more than that. So we're giving them equity now in a way that we never have. We formed a company, well, we've capitalized a company in South Africa called Zafiri, which just received $176 million by several MDBs going beyond the traditional private equity model, 10 years plus 2. This is permanent capital. They can actually go 20 years and a small company in a rural area to build out a network over time. But apart from that, there's also the question of business models. So the business models may not work in the short term. So we've had some of these companies come to us and they've said, you know what, we're not sure these rural customers can pay for their services. So what we need is blended finance solutions. And so then we basically found a way to give them results-based financing, which is essentially grants. Yeah. And grants for increasing the number of connections of households that have yet to be able to pay for their services. But this is not a permanent dependency situation, it's you're bridging and creating a future market. So these are the kinds of instruments that MDBs are now using that goes beyond the generic debt, right? I mean, this is what we're being told. Yes, debt has a place, but you need to go far beyond that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and I couldn't agree more regarding the financing chain. I mean, from research and development and investment to CapEx, to working capital, to export, to FDI. I mean, you need these different instruments. You need to blend them properly. And I think we have talking about that for at least a decade or two. But now we are implementing on the continent, which is very powerful, and TDB is an important part of that. You also mentioned the ecosystem. We will get back to that in the second round when we speak about enhanced coordination and collaboration between DFIs, MDBs, ECAs, and innovation funds, and of course climate instruments. Thank you very much for that approach. Financing is important at the financing ecosystem, but of course also the regulatory environment, the legal environment in times of multipolarization, a weaponization of trade. And that's the reason why initiatives such as the African Continental Free Trade Area are so important in this neo-realist moment. Ambassador, how to build the deeper value chains driving growth is our topic. But can you tell us, from an African Union Commission perspective, where is the progress most visible already? So where are the positive signals we can hear? But of course also, where are the hardest bottlenecks?
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. I would like to start by saying that my participation to this panel and to this 50th anniversary is symbolic, at least in two fronts. The first one is the fact that we have received an invitation as the African Union to join this celebration of the OPEC Fund, a journey of 5 decades of working in areas that are at the heart of the development roadmap of the African Union, so-called the Agenda 2063. So in that respect, I would like, on behalf of the African Union, to really congratulate you, President Khalifa, and congratulate the OPEC Fund for everything done for our countries, the African Union member states. The second symbolic front, and it's a personal one, but also as a member coming from a founding member of the African Union, is the fact that I come from a country that has witnessed the creation of the OPEC fund, Algeria, 75. So I think that and this really makes it very important for us as African Union to join you in this very important milestone. And to start to answer your question, I would like first to say that the scene has been set this morning. The Vice President of Botswana, our brother, the President of AFDB, but also the co-panelists have set the scene. And I would like to say that, yes, we are aware of, we know the diagnosis. We are aware of the challenges, and the main challenge is execution. And I would like to borrow the words of the Vice President of Botswana, execution at scale, very important. But we need to factor in this equation something that we don't hear much in our discourse, is also opportunities. The African continent is a continent of opportunities. Now, going back to the very specific questions that you have asked, one of the flagship projects and programs of Agenda 2063 is precisely the AFCFTA. That 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago, we didn't start the negotiations of the treaty putting in place the AFCFTA, the African Free Trade Continental Area. 2018, we were joining all together in Kigali, and we have adopted the AFCFTA treaty. And today, out of 55 countries, and this was said in the first part of this panel, we have 50 countries that have already signed and ratified. So I think this is already an achievement.
It is.
An achievement because I think that out of 14, 16 flagship projects of the African Union Agenda 2063, the AFCFTA is garnering the most, support, because we know it is at the heart of our continental integration. What have we been doing in order to make this flagship project a success? For instance, we have taken initiatives like that are at the heart of facilitating payments in local currencies. And thanks to our financing partners, the Afrexim Bank, we have been able to put in place the PAPS system that allows our countries to trade among themselves in their local currencies. And we know what this means. The issue of the borders processing is at the heart of facilitating trade and freeing, if I may say so, trade. And it is at times challenging. And this is what we are trying to address. And the Secretariat of AFCFTA has put in place a platform, a digital platform that is precisely designed to address this problem. So 15 countries have now joined that platform, and the initial assessments have proven that, and the data that has been gathered so far says that this can potentially reduce the processing time from 5 days to 6 hours. Time is money.
Absolutely. That's the perfect hint regarding time is money. We don't have to pay for our time, but thank you very much, Ambassador, for the powerful examples. We only have a couple of minutes left, and I would like to have maybe a quick second round. You know, I'm German, brutally German regarding the time, so that's the reason why you allow me maybe to have a quick second round, maybe 2 or 3 sentences per question. Neil, the enabling architecture is something I wanted to cover very briefly also with the other panelists. Can you give us maybe a very concrete example, what you have advocated regarding regional procurement, maybe just in 2 or 3 sentences to give us an idea what that means very concretely.
Thank you very much. I forget I wasn't mic'd there. So at the moment, for instance, I'm by default the chairperson of STC, Africa Union Ministers of Finance. And at the STC, we're looking at very strategically how can we put an accelerator in place for the AFCFTA, meaning that because governments procure a lot, but governments procure about 1/3 of our GDPs. How can we pool that procurement and be able to give rights of supply to different countries so that Ghana can have a right of supply of this microphone, and he'll get funding a lot easier if he has a guarantee market for to produce microphones, because we talk of industrialization now, not just producing raw materials. How do we industrialize using rights of supply, using pool procurement as our government buying powers together to be able to give each country a list of products that they can produce for the other African governments on a right of supply. And I think raising funding then, for instance, from TDB will be very different, especially as we spoke of in that equity space, in the private sector space. So that's something we're working on, and there's progress moving on in July on that one. Thank you.
Perfect. Spot on. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Isifu, you just heard what the Minister of Finance said. What is required from your point of view for this enabling architecture and the financing, the development financing part for Ghana? Maybe 2 or 3 sentences as well, if I may ask.
Thank you very much. It is important to state that financing is critical in the arrangement that we have today, because if you look at the African continent, we are saddled with unsustainable debt. Okay? Cost of financing, cost of servicing loans that we have contracted, to a large extent, is even more than the agri budget, more than the education budget combined. So we have a fundamental problem. And for us to be able to address this gap, we have to look at the current state of the African continent in debt as far as the debt levels are concerned. So solutions must not be wholesale. Solutions must be tailored to the needs of the individual countries. What is prescribed for Ghana may not necessarily be the prescription for another country. So it is important for us to look at the debt levels and also see how we can retool it, we can recalibrate. Climate to debt swaps are things that we're looking at. So for us to be able to make progress, it is important that we look at the debt levels and also invest in adaptation measures that will minimize the shocks of climate change.
Which is peer learning. Thank you. Admasu, just 2 or 3 sentences from your side as well. We heard something on the relevance of climate. Is there relevance as well for other platforms like special economic zones? Why financing is important for that as well?
Yeah, very much so. In fact, this is the natural follow-on from the question around ecosystems. There is a particular effort now to build special agricultural processing zones to deal with food security, but also to deal with the question of value addition and chains. And there, what we're basically doing is we're going beyond the diagnostics like we've been discussing, but we're saying, how can we look at the different solutions that go into a particular geographic space? We talked about economic corridors, we talked about energy, we talked about the AFCFTA. These are critical contributions to the solution, but then there's also working capital that's required. Then you need equity financing. And then there's the whole question of where are these inputs going to come from? And that's why now we have fertilizer plants being constructed on the continent for the first time, which will reduce the cost. Yeah. Cost of financing is huge, but so is cost of input. Yeah. So there's so many things going on. The good thing is we have something called NAFAD, as we've heard from President Sidi, where the African Development Bank is saying we need to start operating more coherently as a financial ecosystem over and above the ecosystem on the ground. And work is underway there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And last but not least, one final sentence, or what's the most important concrete policy advice you would have regarding this value chain addition you have been championing for so many years at the African Union Commission?
Thank you very much. When it comes to value addition, if we are to speak about integration, if we are to speak about prosperity, if we compare the value addition, if we trade amongst ourselves in the continent, you have about 30 to 40% value addition compared to 15 to 20% when we trade with the rest of the world. So the strategic investment is precisely to focus on this value addition agenda, because it speaks to so many vital priorities, including job creation, including the positioning the continent as at its right place in the global economy. Thank you.
I couldn't give a better summary. The strategic investment is really the value chain approach. Thank you very much. And thank you to all the panelists. Your Excellency Nia Riekenberg from Eswatini, Ambassador Selma Malika, thank you so much. Ambassador and Her Excellency Isifu, thank you for a great panel. Just wait for 1 second, because it's not me closing that session, because there is someone else having the closing remarks, because I will hand over now to Alvaro Lario, the president of the International Fund of Agricultural Development. He will reflect on the role of agricultural and rural development, also the value chain upgrading and the economic diversification and resilience opportunity. Alvaro, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. We just leave.
Thank you very much. Let me perhaps wait for the panelists. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by congratulating OPEC Fund for these 50 years of impact, and very much to the President, Dr. Khalifa. We have a very strong partnership, more than $1 billion of co-financing out of our $24 billion of program of work in rural areas and on that first mile, and they're one of our biggest partners. So thank you for the collaboration and all the good work that we are doing together. The panelists were discussing actually a lot of very important points, the importance of a laser focus on high impact investments, strategic coalitions, ecosystems, jobs, and I think this is one of the important questions at the heart of Africa's rural transformation and very much job creation, which is how can the continent move from exporting raw potential to really capturing that greater value, better jobs, and also building more resilient economies. I will be focusing very much on rural transformation and on agriculture, which, as it has been said, is also one of the biggest creators of rural and obviously jobs and employment. So agri-food value chain development can be the bridge, as we heard, between agriculture and industrialization, and also between rural inclusion and economic transformation. Africa's rural and agricultural transformation will not come from production alone, and this is very important. It will come from value addition, as many of the leaders are pointing out, local processing, and also the systems that will allow rural economies to grow and to create jobs with small-scale farmers at the center of this transformation. For us, this means treating small-scale producers as very much entrepreneurs, and that's when we see that the potential can only become income if we talk about food systems, about rural infrastructure, rural energy, rural finance, and providing that ecosystem that we were talking about. So how does the ecosystem look like? Well, it looks like when energy can really chill mill and power processors, when roads are connecting farmers to markets before the value is being lost, and also when digital systems can unlock payments, traceability, and finance. So what we have heard today is that Africa does not lack that productive potential. What we are also missing is actually that productive infrastructure and also the investment that can translate that into jobs and into wealth for the African population. For us, let me share very briefly 2 examples of what that looks like. For example, in Côte d'Ivoire, in an integrated value chain where actually solar irrigated market gardens, specialized seed centers, a decentralized downstream network of processing units, cold storage, logistic hubs, when all of this is connected is when value chains are actually working and when we can create the jobs and the wealth. In Nigeria, where we also are working on cassava or rice value chains, we're working together with farmers, with processors, with traders, with service providers, public institutions, private actors, so that then cassava can be processed, rice aggregated and milled, women processors can upgrade their equipment, and traders and farmers can access finance and markets. This is the complexity when we're talking about very much value chains. In the case of IFAD, 70% of our program of work, of the 24 billion with our partners, is value chains. This is our expertise, and we're very happy of partnering with many of you in the room. So what the panel pointed out, and many of you, is that probably we need three key elements to develop these value chains. One is very much financing, second one, investability, and the third one, which came also here, was regional integration. So let me very briefly talk about each of them. So first, finance. So the complexity of financing arriving at the same time. We're talking about long-term capital for infrastructure, but also working capital for enterprises, risk sharing for banks, traders, commodity finance, and also project preparation for building bankable investments. This is the complexity, and all needs to happen when we are developing this type of investments. Second is investability. Some of you are talking about agro-industrial parks and logistics. Actually, we have some big investments on special agro-processing zones, also with African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank. And these platforms need to be linked to real supply, real demand, capable enterprises, predictable policy by governments. So it cannot just act as a public infrastructure project. It needs to be an entire business ecosystem. And once more, that's the complexity. And the third one, which was also mentioned, which is regional integration and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which we believe that it provides a historic opportunity to really build these deeper regional value chains. But once more, that requires standards, customs procedures, transport corridors, digital systems, local currency. This is once more the complexity that we all as partners need to work together. So in short, we believe that this regional integration has to translate with practical opportunities for many of the entrepreneurs, not only at the port and the trading, but also at the farm gate, at the cooperative level, and at the rural micro enterprises. For us, this has also meant that IFAD, in developing our private sector strategy up to 2030, to bring more and more of these connections on the public infrastructure with expanding access to local private sector, supporting MSMEs, women, youth entrepreneurs, and also strengthening the partnerships with many of you in the room. Let me finalize by thanking on the partnerships that we're having with all of you here and with OPEC Fund. And just saying that we know, and this is the conclusion that I heard also today, that Africa has the resources, the producers, the entrepreneurs, and the markets. So the task for all of us in this room is to connect them through stronger systems and making sure that we are speaking to each other. From the IFAD side, we're ready to stand to work with all of you and to really make this happen for the rural people on the ground. Thank you for your attention.
Mr. Lario, for your inputs. As you've already heard, IFAD is there, AFDB are there, OPEC Fund for International Development are there. We are Africans saying the opportunity is rife, as the Deputy Chair of the Commission said, and the time is now. So we hope to see you all coming to invest and help to unlock these value chains on the African continent. We've come to the end of our session. However, I'd like to invite all panelists onto stage for a group photograph, and thereafter I invite you all to enjoy lunch, and then we will resume an hour later. So if I may ask all our panelists to please make their way to stage for a group photograph, and thereafter lunch, and we'll see you later.